is our crime, this is our sin, but I still believe, through the pain, through the grief, through the lies, through the storms, through the cries, and through the wars. No, I still believe. These waves to cover me. I've turned and tossed upon the waves. When the darkness comes, I feel the grave, but I still believe. Through the cold and through the heat, through the rain and through the tears, through the crowds and through the cheers. No, I still believe. Like I wanna go home. What do I feel? What do I know? But I still believe through the shame and through the grief, through the heartache and through the tears, through the weight and through the years. For people like us in places like this, we need all the hope we can get. No, I still believe.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Branch Brothers Part 2, or Episode 2. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect that I would be capturing the whole... Let's see if I can adjust that. Okay. Hey there, good morning, Rick.
Hey, are we live yet?
Yeah, we're live. Let me make sure I'm getting the right audio capture going. There we go. I think we're good.
Yeah. Give me just. I get the stream on my end. Like I said, I'm streaming from a separate device, so I can talk here and watch at the same time. I love doing that.
Right.
So, get, just... perfect.
If we go full screen, let's see if that. Okay, that's almost. Let's see if I can. Yeah, get some technical setup going on here. Ah, whatever. That's good enough.
All right. Hey, as long as they can see us, it's all that matters, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool, cool. All right. So, uh, I guess we can begin now, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Great to hear.
Now I actually have a few worship songs set up that I got done over the course of the week. I think we can close with those though.
Yeah, I think last time you actually aired your church stream, right? From your church.
Yeah. Um, this time, since we're doing songs that are different from the church that I've been streaming, that's why I didn't open with the church's stream.
Okay, that makes sense.
Let me get the notes up real quick. So yeah, Rick, do you have anything you want to go over?
Not for this week.
All right.
If anything comes up, I'll let you know.
All right. So for those of you who watched our last stream, one of the things we talked about is that I had beef with my mom for a good long while because of something she said to me when we argued as a teenager, and I realized that that was kind of a me problem. Um, it wasn't easy, but I actually approached her later on Sunday after the stream ended and said, "Hey, do you have time? There's something I need to talk to you about." And I asked her if she remembered what she had said about my dad when she said I was going to end up just like him. How she once said that he's going to hell for walking out on us, and she did not remember that, though she did acknowledge it sounded like something she might have said. And I ended up having to apologize to her for holding a grudge against her for something she had no memory of saying when she said that. Um, but yeah, I guess the reason I'm opening with this is because might as well get the hard stuff out of the way first. That was by no means easy for me. Um, After the podcast ended last week, me and Rick actually had a great discussion about um, the part of was it Paul's letters where he's talking about if food from the temple is okay to eat, but if it leads your brothers and sisters to sin, then don't do it.
Yeah, that was specifically in regards to the temples in Corinth that were dedicated to the god. I believe it was the goddess Aphrodite, the goddess of love. It was that whole temple pagan thing.
Ah, yes. Um, yeah, no, we had a great segment there, and I kind of regret not recording that discussion we had. Um, One of the first things in my notes here is spiritual gifts, importance, and what the established church gets wrong, and common misconceptions. Now, I don't know how it goes in the Catholic Church, me not being Catholic and all. Um, Only a handful of the churches I've been to, I think yeah, I think two of the five that I've been to in my life, um, have actually gone into the importance of spiritual gifts. And I think that there's some stuff that the church gets wrong, believe it or not. I don't think that everyone has a spiritual gift that. I'm trying to remember all of them. I know there's prophecy, speaking in tongues and understanding of tongues, which I will get more into that one later. We've got, what else was there?
Spiritual healing.
Spiritual healing, yes. Um, preaching and ministering. And then there's
Which is
also giving as well. And I'm trying to remember what the other one was. That might have been all of them, actually. I stopped counting. I stopped keeping track after 5.
that does sound about right. I think we did cover everything.
Yeah. And speaking in tongues is so it seems to be so widely misunderstood when it's actually one of the most straightforward as to what it is. Um, when people are talking in gibberish, that is not speaking in tongues. Speaking in
No.
tongues is where you go to a foreign land and you don't speak their language, they don't speak yours, but the Holy Spirit translates for you as you are speaking. So they hear your words in their language and you'd be hearing their words in your language. It's not terribly common these days. In fact, I don't think I've heard of any instance of it happening in the modern day. And I often ask myself, how did we get here? How did so many people end up misunderstanding this gift? And I was actually talking with my dad about this on Saturday, and he's had an interesting answer. He said that some people are so hungry for a supernatural encounter that they sort of deceive themselves. It's a sort of self-deception. And that does seem to be the most likely answer. Um, and meanwhile, I remember in Paul's letters, he actually went over this, where he said, "Do not be dismayed that you do not speak in tongues." When prophecy is one of the most vaunted of the spiritual gifts, because it is used to demonstrate God's presence and that He is true to His word.
Oh yeah, definitely. He even went as far as to say they have the whole congregation who are speaking in tongues. It actually might cause mass confusions among non-believers. And he best suggests that if you're going to do that, just have 2 or 3 doing it at a time.
Right. Um, I have had prophetic visions before, and the vast majority of the time, I have not known what they meant until they were until after they were relevant. There have been exceptions. There have been 2 instances where I knew immediately what they meant, and in one instance, I was actually afraid after delivering the message. And the reason I will explain to you guys that one. Um, so in 2020, there was a girl I had an internet relationship with, long distance. She lived in Germany. I live in the United States. And her grandmother was ailing. And me being the good Christian boy, I decided to pray for her grandma. And I asked God that if it is not her time to go, maybe she make a swift recovery. And God told me, "I'm sorry, Seth. I cannot grant you that. Her time draws near." And then I asked, "Well, if it is her time, may she at least not go in fear or in pain?" And God said, "Now that I can grant you." Um, and so, come Monday morning, I get a text from this girl, and she let me know that her grandma passed away. And I asked her, "Did did she go peacefully? Was it in her sleep?" And she's like, "Yes, yes, it was." And I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss. I had prayed that she would at least not go in fear or in pain, and God had told me that her time was near." And she said, "I believe you, because there's no way you could have known that." And that was the first time that I had a prophetic vision, and after delivering the message, I was scared. I actually asked God to take this away from me. It felt unnatural having that kind of knowledge, and I mean, every now and obviously that didn't happen. I later had I had another prophetic vision, and I knew exactly what I meant, and I actually falsified the vision, which is a serious, serious offense against God. I'll tell you guys more about that later, probably. Maybe another episode. But that's the thing about prophetic visions is that the real deal, you'll usually find more people who are afraid of that unnatural insight than someone who's proclaiming it loudly.
I find it interesting how you mentioned that you asked God to take away that gift because I remember the episode of the Bible Year podcast I'm listening to where we talked about spiritual gifts. And in it, Father Mike says, oh, these are stuff that we need to pray for because through the Holy Spirit, we can use these to help bring people closer to God. So now I understand that the vision you had in particular was not a pleasant one. And of course, not everything God says is going to make you feel fuzzy and warm. Sometimes He delivers the harsh truth at times. But at the same time, I always of the opinion of there's a reason why we get this kind of visions, or why sometimes we get those negative instances. There's always a purpose, because remember, God has a plan for everyone, and if something happens, there's always a reason for it.
That is certainly true. Um, but that kind of put things in that incident kind of put things into perspective for me, and I understand now why a lot of prophets in the Bible were actually kind of trained to do what they did. And don't know if the Protestant church does this. I think you guys do have actual training for prophets, though. You Catholics.
I gotta check in on that. I'm like I said, I'm not as familiar with the history of the church as probably other Catholics, but um, given how much we talk about the prophets and prophecy, it wouldn't surprise me if there was something like that. But I would have to look into that further.
Yeah, I do know that there's some Protestant branches that are that do have actual training for this, but um, given I'll get into this more because this kind of ties into our next segment. Um, there's just as many people who are willing to fake spiritual gifts as a grift. Um, then they seem to outnumber the people who are authentic 10 to 1. And I'm just giving a rough estimate there, but that's what it feels like. And it can certainly make finding someone who can help give you guidance when you're experiencing a spiritual gift much more difficult.
Well, there is one way to sort of judge someone's situation like that. Now, we can't judge the heart because we're called not to do that. Only God truly, the only people know who you truly think is yourself and God.
Right.
But what we can do is judge people by the actions of their labor. Like, are their actions bringing people closer to God? Are they bringing them closer to the Word? Or is it leading people away from God? And depending on the outcome of those actions, that's how I think about the best way to determine whether or not someone is authentic, whether they claim to be a prophet, a priest, or some other type of leader.
Right. Yeah. No. The Bible very often says, "By your actions will you know them," and that's really all we do have to fall back on at the end of the day. Excuse me. I seem to be a bit congested.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um. But yeah. Let me see. What else do I have here in my notes? We have. Oh yes. I should have opened with this. I wrote these notes in no particular order. Um, before I before I started this podcast, and before I started broadcasting the church's streams, the last series of sermons the pastor at the church I attended did a series on life in the wilderness and how during those periods of wilderness we often grow closer to God because of it. And I find it funny how that was the last in-person sermon I attended before starting this here podcast with you, Rick. Because there was, because as I've mentioned it to you, but I don't know if I've brought it up on the actual podcast proper. Um, for a while, I was actually getting very inconsistent about doing the church streams, and ultimately, it ended up with the starting of this podcast. Because the reason I stopped attending the church in person is the person I was carpooling with. He was an old dude. He'd been around a good long while, lived a long, fulfilling life, but his time came, and I actually attended the funeral and gave a eulogy, and it kind of left me realize I had actually decided. No, what? I remember now. Um, I had decided that I was going to stop attending in person before that had happened. And then, like, a week later, I got the text message from my pastor saying that Eugene had passed on. And I attended the funeral, gave a eulogy, and that was the last time I was at the church in person. And shortly thereafter was, I think, when I began streaming the church, rehosting the church's streams on Twitch. And one of the last things that Eugene had said to me um, was, "I wouldn't want you falling off the path with God on my account." And I'm like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll be faithful." Um, and then one of the last things I ever said to him was, "I don't know when I'll see you again. Don't know when it'll happen. Don't know how it'll happen, but I do know I'll be seeing you again sometime." Um, and that was the last thing I ever said to him. And it's crazy to think about how oddly foreshadowed this whole thing was, because you had the Sermon on the Wilderness, and then you had my last words to Eugene, where I told him, "Don't worry, I'll still be staying faithful, even if it's not the same." And ultimately, it led to this.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about what happened to Eugene. I'm sure you're pretty close with him, but I'm glad to see how I guess by doing this podcast, you're almost like honoring him in a sense. You know, honoring the promise that you wouldn't walk away, that you would keep pursuing the Lord. And I think through us doing this together, we're not only doing right by God. I guess we're doing right by your friend too, and
Yeah,
that's wonderful to hear.
yeah. Um, okay, so the only other things I have here in my notes are um, okay, we got 2 points left to cover from my notes. My more heretical beliefs and the danger of knowledge before you are ready. Which should we go with?
Let's start with the heretical beliefs first. I think we
All
should get the
right.
crazier stuff out of the way.
Okay. This is why I cannot go to just any church. Um, this right here. I believe that Christians should study, and I stress study, not practice Satanism. So that way, when they accuse something of being satanic, they actually know what they're talking about. And this idea actually came to me. You had mentioned it. I don't know if we were on the podcast when I brought it up with you, but this idea occurred to me after I realized, a lot of conservative folks, they read the Communist Manifesto so that they actually know what socialism is and the points to debunk. The idea is very much the same. Christians should study the various branches of Satanism so that they know what actually is and isn't satanic when they accuse something of it. Know your enemy.
Very true. The last thing we want is a repeat of the moral panic of the 1980s and 90s.
And the early 2000s, too. Um, the moral panics of those eras did a lot of damage to the church's credibility. I don't know if the Catholics got in on the whole spiel, but a lot of the Protestant churches were very much caught up in the moral panic against Dungeons and Dragons, heavy metal, Pokemon, and Harry Potter. And these things are by no means satanic. Well, okay, black metal muddies the waters, and it's probably the most murky of the metal genres because for every King Diamond who's an actual Satanist, you've got like 5 or 6 guys who are just using it as a shtick, basically. Um, but I can tell you with certainty that Harry Potter is not satanic, Pokemon is not satanic, and D&D definitely is not satanic.
Yeah, I think anyone who actually knows Satanism knows none of those properties or franchises fall under the umbrella. And it's interesting you mentioned Pokemon there because I know because the Pope at the time, I believe it was Pope Benedict the 16th, I believe, he had actually said that like Pokemon was demonic back in like the late 90s. However,
What?
a couple of years later, early 2000s, he actually went back and apologized for saying that because when he actually looked at the games, he actually saw I think the anime or the games when he looked at it, he realized it wasn't really satanic at all, and he issued a formal apology for saying that earlier.
Wow, good for him. Good on him. It's funny that you mentioned the Pope because Mewtwo actually got endorsed as a by the Vatican as a good Catholic role model because of his speech at the end of the movie, where he talks about it's not the circumstances of your birth that defines who you are, but what you do with your life.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, I saw it on a meme, but I decided to like look up. Wait, did this actually happen? And yes, Mewtwo was endorsed as a Catholic role model at one point.
Oh wow, I certainly did not know that.
Yeah, no, that got a good chuckle out of me. Too bad Jack Chick never came out and apologized for his bullshit. There
Who?
were. Oh, are you not familiar with Jack? Well, actually, that doesn't surprise me. Jack Chick was a Protestant figure. He was a shithead of the highest caliber. He was the guy who instigated the D&D moral panic, and I think he kept going into the 2000s with Pokemon and all that.
Oh, so he was one of the leading figures in the moral panic
Yeah, he
movement.
was. He really was. And I don't know his actual motives. Um, I've mentioned that I watched Styx Hexenhammer before, and Styx had an interesting theory about these moral panics from the church, in that they were a way to drive up membership because the church was on the decline in those decades.
Yeah, that was going on. Yeah, but at the time that was going on since I believe the 1960s. This is around the time of like the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. And during that time, a lot of boomers, because these were the young people at the time,
Right.
they were going disfavored with religion for really a variety of reasons. I can't get into all of them because there's a lot of factors going in. But what I do know is that because of this, and during this time period, that's when we started to really see a decline in droves. Combine that with the massive wave of divorces we saw in the 70s, and that really impacted church membership in a negative way. I know with the Catholic Church, the one thing that saved the church here in the States was actually the influx of Hispanic immigrants into the country. Because I don't know, for those of you who aren't aware, a majority of people from Latin America, whether it be from Mexico, the Caribbean, or Central South America, majority of those people are Catholic. So naturally, when they came here, they attended Catholic churches, and that boosted membership of the Catholic Church here in the U.S.
Right, and I think that largely comes from the fact that Spain, back in the Age of Discovery, was a very, very Catholic country.
Yeah, they basically Catholicized the entire Latin American region.
Understandably so, though, considering beforehand you guys were conquered by Muslims.
Oh yeah,
And
I
then the
forgot about that part.
yeah, and then the Reconquista happened. So I was like, it makes sense that Spain would be a very Catholic country because they're kind of the ones who liberated it.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of glad we got Catholicized before we got to the West, because I think if we were still Muslim majority back then, Latin America would be a very different region.
Oh yeah, it'd be a hugely different place. Um, so yeah, we've gone over my heresy, and the only other thing I have here in my notes is the dangers of knowledge before you are ready, and then I have 2 bullet points on this: the Book of Revelations and sex, which I I don't know if I told you about this. I told my dad about this on Saturday. I read the Book of Revelations at 6 years old. Now, no 6-year-old is ready to be reading that book. I don't care how mature you are or how um, developed your brain is. Uh,
Yeah, I didn't even touch that book till I was like 18, because like this is when I started reading the Bible in general, because I never read it before. I read passages from like other parts I was in church, but I never actually read the Bible. So for me, I didn't even touch Revelations till like I was already an adult. So I guess it's a different experience for older
It,
folks, I would say.
well, to compound things, I actually had a version of the Bible that was meant for 16-year-olds, not 6-year-olds. Um, so I was reading 10 years above my level, essentially. And most of what I had read in the Bible was the Gospel and the Old Testament. And what I took away from the Old Testament is that God is not an asshole. We are the assholes. We do this to ourselves. The suffering, the tribulations, the hardship, that's all self inflicted. The gospel is God saying, "Yes, you guys need my help here. Let me help you out." But one day I got curious. I'm like, "What's at the very end of the Bible?" So I start reading, and oh boy, that was that was horrific.
Yeah, I can imagine that being if anyone really didn't reading it the first time. Because I'll be honest, I read Revelations the first time, especially as the early chapters. I was kind of shocked at how violent the whole thing got, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Um, Now, I only learned about this back in 2019. Revelations is actually a critique of how Rome was treating the Christians at the time of its writing, written entirely in code. I'll get
Hmm.
more into this later because I would love to do like a whole talk on just Revelations because and that's actually partly what motivated me to read the entire Bible from front to back. Maybe if I have more context, maybe if I understand it more, I'll be less afraid. And that was kind of true. I still don't understand a lot of it, a hell of a lot of it. But it's not a book without hope either. Um, I have there's two songs by a metal band that actually examine both sides of the coin for Revelations. Um, they're songs by the band Gamma Ray. The first is Armageddon. That's the more fire and brimstone side of it, and the other is Abyss of the Void, sometimes called the Savior, and that's about the hope found in Christ's return. And um, I don't have enough I don't have enough studying done on Revelations to do that talk yet, but at some point I will. Um, now,
Yeah, I will say this. The one thing I would say about Revelation, actually has a happy ending. It basically ends with the way it was always meant to be. God being with his chosen people in a new heaven and a new earth, and they all just live together in peace.
right. Um, One interesting thing about Revelations, for the longest time I had thought that everyone dies. Literally everyone. Everyone dies. No, actually. Apparently one third of the Earth's population survive. Which is. I'm going to have to reread it, but yeah, no.
Well, I am about to reread Revelation soon. I'm actually reading through the Bible for the third time. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I am going to get to it soon. And I'll pay particular attention to those kind of details because, like I said, it's been a while since I read Revelations. I don't remember much from it, but I'll keep an eye out for that because I don't recall being aware of that.
Yeah, no, it was something that my dad brought up when we got to talking about it. Um, but no, I would appreciate your paying attention to that as well.
Yeah, I think we should probably hold off the Revelations talk till maybe early next year, because by that point I would have reread Revelations again. So I'll have a fresh enough memory on the topic. I think when I get to that part, I'll probably take some notes as I'm reading as well, just so I can remember the things that come up, or if anything comes up.
Yeah,
That'll be really helpful for that talk as well.
Revelation is one of the few books in the Bible where you cannot absorb it passively. Like, even if you have it being narrated to you, you still need to be taking notes.
Or just paying attention in general.
Yeah. I am actually on Exodus now, and Moses and Aaron are going over, like, how to settle disputes between the Israelites. Um, I can't remember if it's Aaron's that tells Moses you need to delegate here, or if it's Moses that tells Aaron that. But basically, they're going over like what should be done when X, Y, or Z occurs to cause a dispute between neighboring people.
Actually, you know what? I think the latter was correct. I think Aaron was the one who told Moses you gotta delegate this because at the time he was the leader of the group and he was the only one that was dealing with all these questions and stuff. So they basically set up gather a group of elders within the group, and
Right,
they would help to dispute like the minor matters with the people.
right. And then they would have a specific group of judges to take things to that were more serious disputes that needed to be handled by God. Um, but on to the second bullet point. Um, I learned about the birds and the bees at far too young an age, 6 or 7 years old, in fact. And my mom, her heart was in the right place. She didn't want me to be misled by the other school kids. Understandable. I was an autistic boy at 6 or 7 years old. Do you know how literal we take things like that at that age?
You know, as a fellow autist, I can relate to that experience. It's part of the reason why it took me such a long time to understand humor. Like even today, sometimes people say a joke and I don't get it till like well after the fact.
Yeah,
But
no,
I
I'm
can,
the same way. Somebody could make a joke, and I'll just take it literally, even though I know they're joking. And I'm like, and like after the fact, I'll just be asking myself, why did you do that? You knew it was a joke. But I learned about that sort of stuff when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I did my best to forget it because I felt like it made me dangerous somehow. Um, this whole segment kind of there. I was reading a. This whole segment really was actually inspired by a Star Wars comic that I had found online, where a group of younglings actually sneak into the restricted part of the archives and start trying to study a Sith holocron. And they're terrified by what they find in the holocron and just start crying uncontrollably. And that was really what inspired this whole segment on like knowledge before you're ready. Because one of the students said like we shouldn't be doing this. Only the masters are allowed to study these things. And if you find out something before you're ready, it can hurt you. It can mess you up big time. Um,
yeah, it harkens back to what Solomon said, and I don't remember which book. I believe it was, if I recall correctly.
Probably Ecclesiastes, since that thing's
Ecclesi-
90% Solomon.
yes, I believe that was the one. And he said, and he had a whole segment in the book where he's like, "There's a season and a time for everything." And when it comes to learning adult topics like that, especially, there's a reason why we don't teach kids about in general about topics like that at a young age because their brain mental is not mature enough to properly understand. Not only can it be mortifying in the wrong context, but they don't even fully understand it. I,
Right, right. And even if they can, sometimes that understanding can do more harm than good, as you saw with me.
mm.
Because if it just goes over your head, then you don't really take in that knowledge. But if you do have the capacity to understand it, that might actually be worse. Um, because that's the thing about knowledge. It has to be coupled with wisdom. Otherwise, it's only going to end up doing you more harm than good.
Actually, I do want to clarify that a little bit. So, wisdom is actually the combination of knowledge and experience. So, like you said, knowledge is important, but there's also a level of experience that's needed in order to achieve the kind of wisdom to understand properly. If you're lacking one or the other, you won't be able to fully understand it.
Right, right. Um, well, the only other bullet point I have here in my notes is roasting on good/bad Christian films. I have not actually gone through any Christian films recently. Um,
Yeah, me neither.
though in my case, I was sick for most of this week, and I might still be. I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just working on I was busy with work and I was also doing like a side project for uh just like a hobby thing, so I was busy with that. So I did not get a chance to do that either. Maybe that's something we can cover for maybe next week or the week after.
Yeah, there's plenty of opportunities ahead of us. So I guess now we'll just enter the more freeform part of the podcast.
Woohoo! All right, so what should we cover now?
I guess. Well, we started with what's the craziest thing that we heard about last week. What crazy stuff have you heard about this week, Rick?
Let's see. I gotta think on that one. Um, I would say the craziest thing I have heard is, let me just check my because like I said, there was quite a bit. It was a bit of a slow week, I'll say that. But I would say the crazy thing I heard is basically Jennifer Lawrence claiming that she was the first female action movie star.
Who's Jennifer Lawrence?
Okay, have you seen the Hunger Games?
Yes.
She is the girl who plays Katniss Everdeen in those movies.
Fucking Zoomer.
I, she's not even a super bro. She's a millennial.
uh, but
Yeah, I
still,
heard that,
there's
and
so
it's
many
like,
other female action leads that's the only response I can give is just fucking Zoomer.
I know, right? And in an interview, she's talking to this like woman who has been in Hollywood way longer than she has, and she goes, I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was something along the lines of, "Oh, I loved playing Katniss in Hunger Games. So great to show that like, boys can look up to like female heroes and not feel weird or anything." And I go, What are you talking about? Did you forget about Sarah Connor? Did you
Uh,
forget about the girl from Aliens? Did you
ladies,
forget about Kill Bill?
ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I present to you Resident Evil 1999, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis 1999.
Oh yeah, I haven't even. That's just the movies, bro. I haven't even talked about like the games or comics or what have you. Like Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel had her own comic in the '70s. Wonder Woman has been around with her own book since the 1940s.
Oh man, I both love and hate the bad takes that come out of Hollywood. I love them because they're an evergreen joke. You can just keep coming back to them and making fun out of them. I hate them because these people are so out of touch.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just them. It's also we can apply this to like the academics. We can apply it to like boomer politicians. You can apply it to even like even in some cases even people in the medical industry, depending on like what branch of it you're looking at. Like
Really
there's just so
now?
many people. Yeah, there's just so many people out there who've been stuck in this sort of academic or echo chamber for so long that they've essentially cut themselves intellectually from the rest of society. So when they present their ideas to really any sane person or any average Joe like you or me, it just sounds completely bonkers. Like,
Yeah,
what are you talking about? What's
that is
I don't know.
certainly that's the problem though with being too insulated from the rest of the world, is that you become completely out of touch with everyone else.
Yeah, that's actually part of the reason why I've been going out of my way to talk to people who disagree with me, whether politically, socially, religiously, what have you. It's not so much just some ideas as it is just hearing what the other person has to say, or at least trying to understand why they think the way they do. Because everyone has a reason for why they support a belief system or think a certain way. Ideas don't come out of a vacuum; they always come from somewhere, and
Right.
it's just good to know where the other person is coming from on the thing. And I think also because of the way the internet is, sometimes we forget there's a person on the other side of the line. When you just all you see is like text on a screen, it's very easy to like get dehumanized to it or desensitized to it to where you forget that there's a person on the other side and
Yeah.
you don't really know their story. So the last thing you want to do is judge that person based off a dumb tweet they wrote or some random comment on like a YouTube video.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. Um, Shit, that even happens when you're on the phone with someone. I have had I have had run-ins with the SSI office and their ineptitude. One time, the first time they overpaid me, I was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'll pay it back. I was a dumbass because I should have known that that 1,800 was way above what you guys normally pay me. Fair enough. Then they immediately did the same fucking thing just after I paid them off. And I got mad. I started yelling at them. I'm like, do you know how this looks? You realize how this looks for you guys. I will pay it back immediately, but you guys need to get your shit together. And then the third fucking time it happened, I went nuclear. I started screaming at the person on the other end, and I told them, no, you're not getting this back. You fucked up. I'm not responsible for your fuck ups. You can tell your boss or whoever's in charge that you mismanaged the money and sent this much to me. I am not paying you guys back. Fix it yourselves. Don't bother me again. And I never heard back from them after that. And I did not pay them back either. They are they are complete jackasses. The SSI department is what red pilled me on bureaucracy and state-run agencies. I'll tell you a secret. For a long time, I was actually in favor of socialized healthcare. Not after the SSI office. I took one look at that experience and I'm like, you guys want to hand over a life saving industry that treats people with illnesses that could kill them to these jokers? Absolutely not.
No. And here's the kicker, ever since like the Affordable Care Act was established in 2010, health insurance in general has only gotten more expensive. Like there was a time in this country where you could go to a doctor's office for a visit and pay for the whole thing with just cash. You can't do that anymore.
There was a time where you could do that?
Yeah, it was like back in the 90s actually.
Oh, that explains why I don't remember it. I was barely cognizant.
Yeah, because it was actually this book I was reading called The Patriots of the United States. They actually talk about Hillary Clinton's initial pitch for universal health care back in the early 90s. And basically what had happened was it was actually exposed by, oh shoot, what was his name? He was a huge deal back in the 80s and 90s. Conservative
Um,
radio host.
oh, Rush Limbaugh, probably.
Yes, that was him. So Rush did a whole episode basically going over Hillary's healthcare plan. He just said it on the radio. When people heard it, they were so outraged. They called their congresspeople, demanded that they vote against this bill, and basically it ended up failing
Good.
because people just didn't like it. And that was over a decade before the Affordable Care Act, because that act was passed in 2009, and ever since then, healthcare's only got more and more expensive.
I do find
Like,
it.
granted, we did.
Oh, sorry. You keep
No,
going.
that's fine. Yeah, basically, we did get the individual mandate has been effectively all but abolished, so that has definitely crippled it. But like, it is still there, and because of its existence, it has really messed with the way the whole healthcare industry works. Where we have this weird mishmash of like a free market system and a more socialized system that doesn't really work unless for like everyone, especially. So I definitely think we definitely need to reapproach how we're handling healthcare.
Yeah,
Because what
no,
we're doing right now
definitely.
isn't really working. Now, obviously, I don't want to go to socialized healthcare route because we saw in places like Europe and stuff how they were rationalizing care, especially during COVID. But I would honestly be more in favor of a better. I honestly want health insurance to be more like car insurance, where it's just raw free market and you get the best possible deal for the lowest possible price. Because you'll get every other insurance that we have that isn't tied to health insurance. It's basically run like a business, and more often than not, they tend to be I would argue, handled a lot better compared to how the healthcare market is.
It's interesting that you
Mainly,
bring that up because I actually have state health insurance. I have Medi-Cal, and unfortunately, the medication that I take are so expensive that that's the only feasible way to do it. Because I take Depakote for as an anti-seizure medication and for bipolar disorder, mirtazapine for depression, and then um, dexmethylphenidate for ADD. Just one of those is comically expensive. All three of them, ouch.
yeah. That
But
is an interesting question, though. like if the Affordable Care Act hadn't passed, would those medicines still be as expensive? Because
Probably
I'm pretty sure
not,
one.
but um, I think the best approach is for people who have a genuine disability, they should be able to apply for state health insurance or that covers the price of their medication. Whereas if you don't have a disability, you should have to go through the market.
All right, that does sound like a fair compromise. It helps to ensure that like the people who really need the help get it, but like the people who only have to see the doctor once a year, they can get not only go through the market, but they can probably find a far cheaper plan
Yeah.
that isn't going to like cost them like an arm and a leg.
Now, I will say this: it's by no means a perfect system either. Medi-Cal is a fucking pain in the ass. I have had a complete pain. I've been tearing my hair out because my previous psychiatrist before the one I am seeing uh, stopped responding to my calls, just vanished, no contact. And then for a time, my current one also was doing that. Now, I recently got my medication refilled, so maybe they finally got their shit together. I haven't heard from them since I made my previous call asking, hey, what's up? Um, and I do find it funny that this only happened after my SSI worker, or no, ILS worker, excuse me, fucking acronyms. My ILS worker actually lodged a formal complaint against this psychiatrist's office. Um, and I've also there's another story out of the UK that I heard of that made me realize socialized medicine is not helpful to anyone really, at least the way the UK has it. Do you watch Sargon of Akkad?
I do not.
Have you watched Lotus Eaters any?
I have not.
Okay. Sargon actually brought up how his son, or was it his son or his nephew, has autism. And the people at the NHS said that they couldn't help him, they couldn't, like, have him go through therapy until 3 years. And that's, if you know how autism is, therapy is most helpful in the first 3 years of a kid's life if they have autism.
Really? I was
Yeah.
unaware of that. Well, then again, I wasn't diagnosed with autism until I was like 3. So
Mm,
by the time I probably would have been like, granted, like I said, I actually turned out pretty well. Wasn't anything, it was to be fairly mild case. It wasn't like a severe thing or anything.
right.
But like, yeah, it was a situation where uh my parents just didn't really know until well past that point. So it's interesting you bring that up. I didn't even know. I don't even know if therapy was an option for kids back then because this was in the early 2000s, so it might have been different. Um,
Yeah,
so
and I don't know if it was like that, because you're from Puerto Rico originally, aren't you?
well, my family is. I'm not. I'm actually born here in the states.
Oh, okay. I was born in Illinois, and we knew relatively early on with all three of us kids. I was less than a year old. Sarah, my sister, who is severely cognitively impaired, only a couple months old, and they knew. And my brother, he was, yeah, they knew within like a year's time. And thankfully, occupational therapy and other sorts of therapy were able to help us. Not all to the same degree. My sister is still severely impaired. Um, she doesn't talk so much as she has words that she knows. Um, and then my brother, good God, my brother is pretty high functioning, but that kid has got more than autism going on with him.
Oh yeah, we already covered so much about him in the last episode. I don't think there's a need to rehash any of that here.
Well, I do have a story for you that I didn't tell you on the last episode. This is why I refer to Sam as a mutant. He once took a drill to his arm to prove a point to somebody. The point was that he does not feel pain.
Wait, does he actually have like that disorder where like you can't feel pain, or is he just was it
It's
just a tough guy act?
I think he actually might have that disorder. Um,
Yeah, because that is an actual thing. I cut wait when I was studying psychology in college. That was one of the ones we talked about where a person, for whatever reason, cannot feel pain. Like they can get damaged, they can get their bones broken, things like that, but they don't feel pain. And that could be actually a dangerous thing, especially for young kids, because if their pain receptors don't work, they could literally kill themselves by accident.
yeah, no, he was a teenager when this whole thing started. But I would not be surprised to find out he actually has that disorder where your pain receptors don't work. But yeah, no, thankfully Sam does not have the tendency to self harm or put himself in life threatening situations like my sister does. The weird thing about my sister is she has this sort of sixth sense where she can find where she can find an unlocked door like nobody's business.
Huh.
If she wasn't so severely impaired, she'd make a great burglar. But yeah, what else have we got to go over? Um, because we've only been at this for
An hour.
an hour, yeah. Whereas our pilot episode was like 3 hours long.
Yeah, I will say this. I want to stray. So I think it's fine with a pilot episode because we were just getting started. But I think for the future, I want to try and keep a consistent runtime, so that way it doesn't like go all over the place. 'Cause I want to be in a situation where we have one episode that's 4 hours, and then we got one that's like half an hour. I would
Yeah,
like
no, a
to try to
consistent
avoid that.
runtime is probably a good idea. Um, since we seem to have run out of things to talk about for now, um, do we want to just go on to the worship segment and end the call here?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, let's do that. Well, yeah, let's music. That'd be fun.
All right, cool. All right, and then I will close out of Discord and get the capture going. This PC. Make sure I have the capture set up properly. And then no, that's not right. Hmm. Video. No, that's not right. Huh. It's not letting me capture video playback. That's weird. That's going to complicate a few things. There we go. Let's see if I can capture that instead. No. No. Also no. What on earth? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can pull up the song on YouTube. I'll be right back. Okay, I have it up on YouTube. Excuse me. Hopefully. Yeah, there we go. Get the audio capture going too. Fire and fan the flame, sacrifice without a name, offerings on the altar to the unknown God. Multitudes of God come on our landscape in our lives, images of deities and halls of sacrifice, philosophers and scholars and sophisticates we are. Our gods are our religion and our religion is our God. A stranger came to town one day and fearlessly proclaimed, the altar has a name. We live and have our being as your own poets have said. When the flame, sacrifice without a name, offerings on the altar to the unknown God. Dance around the altar blaze, with the words your hands have made. On the altar to the unknown God. He dwells not in temples built by human hands. He needs no assistance or service of man. The name which you worship is greater than all. Your idols of death never answer your call. All nations he formed from the flesh of one man. He marked all their times and the boundaries of lands. Your life has no breath, he bestows with his days. So seek him and find him, for he is not far away. Fire upon the altar burns the sacrifice. Sacrificial lamb was slain to pay the final price. Come ye heavy laden, sinners mercy cry. The unknown God you call upon is nigh. Gather round the altar, stoke the holy fire. Reviving flame of righteousness are rising higher. Come ye hungry, eat the bread and life and drink the wine. Altar of the living God divine. image of stone or silver and gold. No effigy mankind has raised to behold. The day on the hour of judgment is set. Through rain and fire, resurrection of the dead. Build the fire and fan the flame. Sacrifice without a name. Offerings on the altar to the unknown God. Stand before the altar blaze. Bring the lives his hands have made. Put them on the altar to the one true God. Your unknown God is the one living God. All right. Let's see. Let's see if there's a lyrics video for the other song. I had several that I had planned to use today, but with the inability to capture the video feed, I might have to end it here. I don't know. How long have we been at this for? An hour? Yeah, you know what? We're going to end it here. I'm going to try and find an alternative means to capture the video. Hopefully next week we'll be able to use the full roster. I look forward to seeing you all there. Goodbye, everyone. I'll see you this afternoon with some Resident Evil 3.